and welcome to the 77th episode of Recluse Horror. This is a daily horror movie review podcast. So just a little background on the project. Back on my birthday in April, I decided I wanted to watch and review a horror movie every single day. I have done so for the past 344 days, although only the last 77 have been podcasts. Before that, it was text reviews. So the movie that I have to talk about today is another short film. This will probably be a short episode. There's really not a whole lot to talk about with this one. It's called Sloven from 2015. That's Sloven as in slovenly, Sloven. Basically, the premise is this guy, it's Halloween, and he's come back to his apartment, which he shares with another person, and it's just a complete mess. And it turns into a horror movie. So this one was definitely not bad. There is a specific element of it that is something that I haven't seen done in exactly the same form, but other than this one unique sort of angle that it chooses, it doesn't really go very far out of its way to do anything different, which is fine for a short film, and specifically one that seems like it's being done by people who aren't like the most experienced at any of the things that they're doing. It is just fine. The acting in it isn't super great, but it's definitely not bad. It's some of the better beginners acting that I've probably seen in these. Some of the dialogue is also a little bit clunky, which can definitely add to that. It's not super clunky, but it's just like a word off from something like I feel like a natural human being would say. So that can be a little bit of a problem in just a couple of places. But other than that, the dialogue is fairly naturalistic. The lighting and the cinematography, the lighting is good. It's adequate for what it is. It doesn't do anything special, but it's not really required by the circumstances. I would say that it was a little dim in places, but it's not dim enough that like you have any problem really seeing anything. It's just possibly dimmer than I feel like I would have my apartment. If I had my own apartment, I don't feel like I would be walking around with it this dim. That said, my own living room is pretty dim, so maybe I would. I don't know. The cinematography is... There's nothing special in this, but it's very well done in the fact that, like, all of the shots, they do make sense. There's no weird framing. There's no camera shakiness. And there actually is one or two shots that were very well thought out. It's clear, they wanted something to happen in a certain way. And you do see that, do sort of see the reveal that they're trying to give you, which is actually pretty neat. So it was clearly some thought was put into the cinematography, which I appreciate. Mind you, these are not shots that I haven't seen before in other places, but as I said, it seems like these people are not like the most experienced group. I would be surprised if this was the first thing that they had ever done. But it's for a beginner's track, it's better than I would anticipate and definitely better than I could achieve, so. One thing that I really particularly enjoyed about this was the apartment. So it's a nice looking apartment. As I said, it's it looks like an apartment. But the one thing that's particularly interesting to me is like the mess that he comes home to, that this lead character comes home to, is a very realistic looking mess. Like if you've ever been to a place where it was like a house that people just didn't care. It was like a party house. People didn't really care. Trash would get, just kind of left places on top of counters and things like that. It felt, I've been to a number of those. I think we were all little hoodlums at some point in our lives. And I definitely hung out with some people who had a house that they definitely didn't take care of, even in the slightest degree. Just trash accumulated and things ended up in really stupid places, but like places that you could see somebody just setting it down and they're like, oh, I'll go back and get that, and then never coming back and getting it. A lot of times when you find like a messy room or a messy car or something like that, it feels very unrealistic to like the actual circumstances. The circumstances under which this mess sort of showed up, as far as, you know, basically how the mess was made. This looks like that sort of a mess. It was like, you know, everything looks like stuff that I've seen out of that sort of a situation. And I really appreciated that, because I feel like, I mean, really, really big budget movies cannot make a realistic mess. Like, so I know that's like kind of a weird thing to be talking about, but if you've ever like been to a house like after a party, or like a get together that got a little bit out of hand, or like a get together with people who didn't respect their environment, like this is what that looks like, very realistically. That was probably my favorite part, which is like a weird thing to be the favorite part of any kind of a movie. But I did appreciate that, because I mean, I have seen this exact mess in somebody's house before and woken up and been like, this is terrible. What did you guys do after I went to sleep? Really the biggest downfall of this, and I wouldn't actually, downfall is way overstating that. The largest problem with this, the thing that falls the shortest, I would say, is definitely the story. Now, as I said, there is an element of this that is really interesting and unique, and it's something that I haven't seen in this specific form before in a horror movie, which I definitely applaud any sort of new anything. So I did appreciate that. However, the way the story actually functions is very similar to 5,000 short films that I've seen and 150,000 movies, like feature-length movies that I've seen. It just doesn't really distinguish itself in any other way. And so just the nature of it, I guess, makes it feel like, even though it has done something new and interesting, it gets overshadowed by this very natural story progression that's happened in every other horror movie for decades. That is still, honestly, looking at it from a different perspective, that's still kind of solid work. If you're able to get something that feels natural like a horror movie, and you're making a horror movie, then you're kind of on the right track. I really think there are some things that they could have done to sort of distinguish themselves. I do understand the budgetary limitations and so forth. This was clearly like not a huge budget picture. Again, may have been one of those big borrow and steal situations where like they're like, okay, well, my friend says we can film in his apartment and we can trash it as long as we clean up after ourselves afterwards, or something like that. And having probably actors who are friends of the director and writer and all of that, who like are basically donating their time for exposure, that very, very annoying artist thing called exposure. So I do definitely understand that element of it, and the fact that people making that sort of a project are able to get something that approximates a horror movie this well without feeling like it's an imitation, but actually just feeling like it is one of those horror movies, is pretty successful on that level. Still, I feel like with like a little bit more work and a little bit more focus, and maybe some other creative minds, attached to this project, or like just being used as a sounding board, they maybe could have come up with something beyond just that one thing that I can't talk about, that's totally a spoiler, that sets it apart. I feel like with a little tiny bit more work, it could have come off feeling a little bit less like you're playing, like trope bingo later on in the rest of the film. That said, myself, I honestly couldn't really think of anything off the top of my head that's better, which is, again, probably a good sign. A lot of the horror movies that I have problems with like scripts like this, there's like 1,000 ways that you could do it that would make it seem more unique, or that would, solve whatever dumb problem that the movie has. This one is not an easy answer one. This is definitely one that I feel like you would have to sort of not necessarily like full on actually workshop it, but I think you would actually have to like, okay, what can we accomplish with our budget? How can we set this apart in another way besides the one that we already have? How can we make this story not just go the same way that all of these stories go? And there's not, again, any kind of easy answers for that. That would take a lot of creativity to do. So, again, I definitely applaud that they were able to make something that felt like a horror movie and not an imitation of a horror movie. And that one idea that again is something that I haven't quite seen before, super great. I really think that's all I have to say about this one. Much like all of the other short films basically that I watched, you can find this one on YouTube. If you're interested in it, definitely check it out. It's a very well executed piece for a group of people who probably don't have like a ton of experience. Just based on what I'm seeing, I don't think they have a ton of experience and definitely don't have a ton of budget. I have seen a lot worse from things with a lot bigger budgets. This one definitely not the worst that I have seen, and it's and it's definitely worth the price of admission, which is $0 if you're interested in it. So that's my review of Sloven from 2015, and that's my episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, whatever it is on whatever site that you found us. If you would like to share it with someone, that is the best way to help out the show. If the person that you're sharing with does not have the same platform as you, or if you don't like the platform that you found us, you can find us on YouTube, Player FM, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, and pretty much any podcatcher out there. If you would like to reach out to us on social media, you can do so on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can email me at reclusehorror@gmail.com. I don't really have a whole lot else to say, so I guess I'll just say thank you and have a great night.